Have you ever heard of a mystery so impossible that an entire car, along with 3 teenagers inside it, seemed to vanish from the face of the earth? No wreckage. No witnesses. No bodies. No clues. Just 3 high school seniors who left their prom on a warm spring night and never came home. For nearly a quarter of a century, families searched, investigators chased dead ends, and an entire community lived under the shadow of a question that nobody could answer. Then, decades later, construction workers made a discovery buried beneath concrete that would shock an entire county and reopen one of the most haunting cold cases anyone could remember. This is a story of friendship, disappearance, unanswered questions, and a secret that remained hidden for almost 24 years. Before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Cold Case 247, and turn on notifications so you never miss another true crime investigation. And while you watch, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. It was the 16th of May, 1992. A Saturday night. The kind of night that felt like the beginning of everything. In Lincoln County, Ohio, excitement filled the air as students gathered for their high school prom. Graduation was only weeks away, and many of the seniors believed they were standing on the edge of a brand new life. Inside the lakeside banquet hall, music echoed across the dance floor. Colored lights flashed against polished walls while students laughed, danced, and posed for photographs that would become memories. Among those students were 3 close friends: Joseph Mullaney, William Hamilton, and Nikki Belays. All 3 were 18 years old. They had grown up together. They attended the same schools, shared many of the same classes, spent weekends together, and knew nearly everyone in town. People often described them as inseparable. Joseph was known for his easygoing personality and sense of humor. William was loyal, dependable, and the kind of friend who could always be counted on. Nikki was bright, kind, and had a smile that friends said could light up an entire room. That evening, nothing seemed unusual. Nothing suggested danger. Nothing hinted that the 3 teenagers were living the final hours of their lives. As the night continued, students danced, laughed, and celebrated the approaching end of high school. Teachers and parents watched proudly from the sidelines. Photographers snapped pictures. Friends exchanged promises about staying in touch after graduation. Everything felt normal. Everything felt safe. Shortly before midnight, the celebration began winding down. Students slowly made their way toward the parking lot. Groups gathered outside under the glow of streetlights. Some discussed after-parties. Others planned late-night drives. The atmosphere was filled with excitement and freedom. Witnesses later recalled seeing Joseph, William, and Nikki leaving together. Joseph was driving his silver Pontiac Grand Prix. The 3 climbed into the vehicle and pulled away from the banquet hall. Friends assumed they were heading to one of the local gathering spots before returning home. Nobody thought twice about it. Nobody had any reason to. That was the last confirmed sighting of them alive. The following morning seemed ordinary at first. Parents assumed their children had stayed out later than expected. After all, it was prom weekend. Teenagers often stretched curfews during special occasions. But as the hours passed, concerns slowly began to grow. Joseph never returned home. William never returned home. Nikki never returned home. Phone calls were made. Friends were contacted. Parents checked with relatives. Nobody knew where they were. As afternoon turned into evening, concern became panic. The 3 teenagers had completely disappeared. Authorities were contacted, and a missing persons investigation began. At first, some officers believed the teenagers would eventually return. They had seen similar situations before. Young people occasionally left town for a day or 2 after prom. Sometimes they stayed with friends. Sometimes they wanted a little extra freedom before graduation. But as more time passed, that explanation became harder to believe. No one had seen them. No one had heard from them. No one knew where they had gone. Investigators quickly realized something was wrong. A search effort was organized. Deputies examined roads leading away from the banquet hall. Volunteers searched fields, wooded areas, and remote locations throughout the county. Search teams walked miles of rural roads. Helicopters flew overhead looking for any sign of a crashed vehicle. Bloodhounds were brought in. Divers examined nearby bodies of water. Yet despite all those efforts, investigators found absolutely nothing. No tire marks. No broken glass. No damaged guardrails. No personal belongings. No vehicle. The complete absence of evidence was almost as disturbing as the disappearance itself. Normally, accidents leave clues. Crimes leave clues. People leave clues. But in this case, there was nothing. It was as though Joseph, William, Nikki, and the Pontiac had simply vanished. Days turned into weeks. The story quickly spread beyond Lincoln County. Newspapers began covering the mystery. Television stations reported on the missing teenagers. The case captured public attention because it seemed impossible. How could 3 people disappear without leaving a single trace? Speculation began almost immediately. Some believed the teenagers had run away. Others suspected foul play. Rumors circulated throughout town. People gathered at diners and coffee shops discussing possible explanations. Everyone had a theory. Nobody had evidence. Investigators followed every lead they received. They interviewed classmates, teachers, friends, family members, employees at local businesses, anyone who might have seen something. Every possible sighting was investigated. Every rumor was examined. Every tip was pursued. Again and again, investigators reached dead ends. One witness claimed to have seen a vehicle matching the Pontiac's description near a river. The lead went nowhere. Another person believed they spotted Nikki at a restaurant in another state. That lead also proved false. Months passed. The search continued. Families refused to give up hope. Joseph's father spent countless hours driving county roads, checking ditches and remote areas that search teams may have missed. William's family distributed flyers throughout neighboring communities. Nikki's mother became known for keeping detailed records of every tip that came into the investigation. Each phone call offered a moment of hope. Each dead end brought fresh heartbreak. The emotional toll was devastating. Birthdays passed. Graduation came and went. While classmates celebrated the beginning of their futures, 3 seats remained empty. The absence was impossible to ignore. Teachers spoke about the missing students. Friends shared memories. Parents struggled to imagine life moving forward without answers. As summer arrived, search efforts intensified. Divers searched ponds and lakes. Investigators examined abandoned buildings. Volunteers combed through dense woods. Still, there was nothing. Not a single piece of evidence that could explain what had happened. The mystery became larger than the investigation itself. People throughout the region began discussing the case. Theories became more elaborate. Some believed the teenagers had accidentally driven into deep water. Others suspected a kidnapping. There were even whispers of a cover-up. As often happens in unsolved cases, the lack of answers created an environment where rumors flourished. Yet despite all the speculation, one fact remained unchanged. No evidence supported any theory. For the families, life became divided into 2 parts. Everything before the disappearance. And everything after. Every morning began with the same question. Could today be the day they finally learn the truth? Every evening ended with disappointment. Churches held vigils. Community members gathered to pray. Candles flickered beneath photographs of the missing teenagers. People wanted answers. People wanted closure. But closure never came. At least not then. As the first anniversary approached, hope began to fade. Investigators had exhausted most available leads. Searches became less frequent. Media attention slowly decreased. The public gradually shifted its focus to newer stories. But the families could not move on. How could they? There were no bodies. No confirmed crime scene. No explanation. Only uncertainty. Years passed. New investigators reviewed the case. Fresh eyes examined old evidence. Files were reopened. Maps were studied. Witness statements were reviewed. Yet each review reached the same conclusion. There simply wasn't enough evidence to solve the mystery. The case eventually entered cold case status. For many communities, that designation marks the beginning of the end. Resources become limited. Attention fades. Files gather dust. But for the families, the search never truly stopped. They continued hoping. Continued wondering. Continued waiting. The 1990s gave way to the 2000s. Children who had been born after the disappearance grew up hearing stories about it. The mystery became part of local history. People referred to it as the prom night disappearance. A cautionary tale. A ghost story. A reminder that some questions remain unanswered. Yet beneath all the rumors and legends were three real families living with unimaginable grief. Parents aged. Siblings built lives of their own. But the missing teenagers remained frozen in time. Forever 18. Forever remembered through photographs. Forever absent. Years later, a retired investigator became interested in the case once again. The disappearance had haunted him for decades. He reviewed old files. Examined forgotten reports. Looked at areas that may have been overlooked during the original investigation. One particular detail caught his attention. Near the area where the teenagers were believed to have traveled that night stood an industrial development zone. Construction had been taking place around the same time as the disappearance. The observation seemed minor. But in cold cases, sometimes even the smallest detail can matter. Investigators looked into old construction records. Examined maps. Studied property changes that had occurred over the years. Nothing immediately stood out. No breakthrough emerged. Once again, the investigation appeared stalled. Yet unknown to everyone involved, the answer was sitting quietly beneath the ground. Hidden in plain sight. Waiting. For decades, nobody noticed it. Nobody suspected it. Nobody imagined that the truth could be concealed beneath layers of concrete. The years continued to pass. New roads were built. Businesses opened and closed. Construction projects transformed the landscape. Areas that once looked completely different were now almost unrecognizable. The world moved forward. The mystery remained behind. By the year 2016, nearly 24 years had passed since Joseph, William, and Nikki disappeared. Many people believed the truth would never be discovered. Investigators had searched for decades without success. Families had endured years of uncertainty. Hope had become fragile. Then, on an ordinary summer day, everything changed. A construction crew arrived at a redevelopment site near Dry Creek Industrial Park. The workers were carrying out routine demolition work. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. Just another day on the job. Machines began breaking apart old sections of concrete. Workers removed debris. Dust filled the air. The project moved forward as expected. Then a machine operator struck something beneath the concrete. At first, nobody thought much of it. Old industrial sites often contain buried objects. pipes, metal tanks, construction materials. The crew assumed it was something similar. But as more debris was cleared away, a strange shape began to emerge. A curved metal surface. Then glass. Then something unmistakable. A vehicle roof. The workers immediately stopped what they were doing. Authorities were contacted. Investigators arrived. And slowly, carefully, excavation began. What they uncovered would shock everyone. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who is truly following this shocking Cold Case 247 investigation from beginning to end. As investigators secured the site, word began spreading through the community. At first, details were scarce. A vehicle had been discovered beneath concrete. That alone was enough to spark curiosity. But when officials began comparing the vehicle's dimensions and visible features to old records, a chilling possibility emerged. Could this be the Pontiac Grand Prix that had vanished along with Joseph Mullaney, William Hamilton, and Nikki Belays nearly 24 years earlier? The question hung in the air. No one wanted to jump to conclusions. Families had endured countless false leads over the years. Rumors had come and gone. Hope had risen and collapsed more times than anyone could count. Still, investigators knew this discovery was different. This was not another reported sighting. This was not another anonymous phone call. This was physical evidence. Real evidence. The excavation process moved slowly. Every inch of dirt and broken concrete had to be removed carefully. Forensic teams documented everything. Photographs were taken. Measurements were recorded. Evidence markers surrounded the site. What had started as a routine construction project was now a major crime scene. As more of the vehicle became visible, investigators noticed something unsettling. The car appeared remarkably intact. It had not been crushed by heavy machinery. It had not been destroyed by a catastrophic impact. Instead, it seemed almost preserved. As though it had been deliberately sealed away from the outside world. The roof emerged first. Then the windows. Then the body of the vehicle. Finally, after hours of careful excavation, authorities were able to confirm what many had already begun to suspect. The vehicle was Joseph's Pontiac Grand Prix. The same car that had disappeared on prom night. The same car investigators had searched for across fields, lakes, rivers, forests, and highways. The same car that had somehow remained hidden beneath concrete for almost a quarter of a century. The discovery stunned the county. News crews arrived almost immediately. Reporters gathered near the perimeter. Former investigators who had worked the original case received phone calls. Family members were contacted. For many, the emotions were overwhelming. The discovery brought answers. But it also brought heartbreak. Because if the car was there, investigators already knew what they were likely to find inside. The vehicle was transported to a secure forensic facility where specialists could examine it under controlled conditions. Every step of the process was documented. Every piece of evidence was preserved. For the first time in nearly 24 years, investigators had something tangible to work with. Inside the vehicle, forensic teams made the discovery everyone had feared. Human remains. 3 sets. The remains were carefully recovered and examined. DNA testing would later confirm their identities. Joseph Mullaney, William Hamilton, and Nikki Belays. The 3 missing teenagers had finally been found. For their families, the confirmation brought a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief because the uncertainty was finally over. Sorrow because the outcome was the one they had dreaded for decades. Many family members described the experience as reopening an old wound. The pain never truly disappeared. It had simply been waiting beneath the surface. Now it returned all at once. As forensic experts examined the vehicle, investigators focused on a critical question. How had the car ended up beneath concrete? The answer would determine whether this was a tragic accident, a criminal act, or something in between. The vehicle itself offered some clues. Surprisingly, there was limited evidence of a high-speed collision. The damage that investigators expected to see in a major crash simply was not present. This immediately raised concerns. If the teenagers had accidentally driven into a construction pit, how had the vehicle remained in relatively stable condition? Another troubling detail emerged. The car's position appeared unusually neat. It was not twisted. It was not crumpled. It did not appear to have tumbled violently into place. Instead, it looked almost as though it had been placed there. Carefully. Deliberately. Investigators knew they needed to examine the history of the property itself. They began reviewing decades-old records, construction permits, land ownership documents, inspection reports, development plans, anything that might explain what happened. As they dug through old paperwork, a timeline began to emerge. The section of concrete where the Pontiac had been discovered was poured approximately 1 year after the teenagers vanished. That detail immediately caught investigators' attention. If the car had been buried before the concrete was poured, someone involved in that construction project might have known something. The property had been owned at the time by a local contractor named Paul Henders. His company handled industrial construction projects throughout the region. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. But the deeper investigators looked, the more questions appeared. Records suggested portions of the construction project had been completed under unusual circumstances. Certain work logs appeared incomplete. Some documentation was missing. Timelines did not always match. Individually, these inconsistencies might not have meant much. Together, they painted a troubling picture. Investigators began tracking down former employees who had worked on the site. Many struggled to remember details after so many years. Others had moved away. Some had passed away. But eventually, detectives located a retired foreman who remembered the project. His account would dramatically change the direction of the investigation. According to the former foreman, one section of concrete had been poured during an overnight operation. The work was rushed. The schedule was unusual. And access to part of the site had reportedly been restricted. He recalled arriving the next day to find that portion of the project already completed. At the time, he thought little of it. Construction projects often involved unexpected changes. But looking back, the circumstances seemed strange. The foreman also remembered being paid in cash for work performed during that period. Again, not unheard of. But unusual enough to stand out in his memory decades later. As investigators compared his statements with surviving records, concerns grew. The timeline aligned closely with the disappearance. The location matched where the car had eventually been discovered. And the unusual overnight work raised serious questions. Could the vehicle have been intentionally buried? If so, who was responsible? And why? The possibility transformed the investigation. For years, authorities had assumed the teenagers were victims of some unknown accident or crime. Now investigators had to consider a new theory. What if the car had been hidden? What if someone knew exactly where it was all along? The more experts studied the site, the harder it became to dismiss that possibility. Engineering specialists concluded that burying a vehicle beneath a concrete foundation would have required heavy equipment. The type commonly available on construction sites. A backhoe. A crane. Excavation machinery. In other words, whoever buried the vehicle would likely have needed access to professional equipment. This was not something an ordinary person could accomplish easily. Attention increasingly focused on Paul Henders. By then, he had long since left Ohio. Years earlier, he had reportedly relocated and was living a quiet life in another state. investigators traveled to interview him. When they arrived, they found an elderly man far removed from the busy contractor he once had been. At first, he appeared cooperative. He acknowledged working on the development project. He acknowledged overseeing portions of the construction. But he denied any knowledge of the missing teenagers or the buried vehicle. As questioning continued, investigators noticed inconsistencies. Some answers contradicted surviving records. Certain details changed over time. Nothing amounted to proof. But enough concerns emerged to keep investigators interested. For the families, these developments were both encouraging and frustrating. After decades of uncertainty, it finally seemed possible that someone might be held accountable. Yet they also understood the challenges. Evidence had aged. Memories had faded. Potential witnesses had disappeared. Building a criminal case after nearly a quarter of a century would be incredibly difficult. Meanwhile, forensic experts continued examining the Pontiac. Every inch of the vehicle was analyzed. Investigators searched for signs of foul play, signs of mechanical failure, signs of anything that might explain what happened during those final hours. Some findings deepened the mystery rather than solving it. The available evidence failed to support many of the theories that had circulated over the years. There was no clear indication of a violent attack inside the vehicle. There was no obvious evidence of a high-speed chase. There was no definitive proof of a struggle. Yet there was also no simple explanation for how the vehicle ended up where it was found. The deeper investigators looked, the more complicated the case became. One fact remained undeniable. For nearly 24 years, the answer had been hidden beneath the ground. Thousands of people had driven past the site. Workers had operated nearby. Buildings had been constructed above it. And all the while, the missing teenagers remained only a few feet below the surface, waiting to be found. For many investigators, that realization was haunting. They thought about the countless searches, the helicopters, the divers, the volunteers, the sleepless nights spent reviewing evidence. The answer had been there all along, just hidden in a place nobody thought to look. Months passed as authorities assembled their findings. The public eagerly awaited conclusions. Families hoped for clarity. Investigators hoped for accountability. But cold cases rarely provide perfect endings. And this case would prove no different. By the time officials prepared their final report, significant questions remained unanswered. Questions that, even today, continue to fuel debate among those familiar with the case. And as the investigation moved toward its conclusion, many began to wonder whether the full truth would ever be known. Because sometimes solving a mystery does not mean answering every question. Sometimes it simply means discovering how much remains hidden in the shadows. The discovery of the Pontiac answered the biggest question that had haunted Lincoln County for nearly 24 years. Joseph Mullaney, William Hamilton, and Nikki Belaise had finally been found. But finding them and understanding what happened to them were two very different things. As forensic teams completed their examinations and investigators reviewed thousands of pages of reports, one reality became impossible to ignore. The evidence provided answers. But it also created new mysteries. The public waited for an official explanation. Families waited for closure. Investigators worked around the clock trying to reconstruct events that had taken place almost a quarter of a century earlier. It was a difficult task. Time had destroyed evidence. Witness memories had faded. Records had disappeared. And some of the people who might have known the truth were no longer alive. Still, authorities pressed forward. Engineers, forensic specialists, detectives, and prosecutors reviewed every available detail. The goal was simple. Determine exactly how 3 teenagers and a car ended up sealed beneath concrete for decades. Eventually, investigators developed a theory. According to the official findings, after leaving Prom that night, Joseph's Pontiac may have traveled onto an unfinished service road near a developing industrial area. The road was poorly lit. Construction was underway. Certain sections remained incomplete. Investigators believed the vehicle could have entered an excavation zone or drainage area and become trapped. Under this theory, the teenagers were unable to escape. The vehicle remained hidden in the construction area. Days later, workers unknowingly poured concrete over the location. The result was a tragedy hidden beneath a foundation for nearly 24 years. On paper, the explanation seemed plausible. It accounted for the vehicle's location. It explained why searchers never found the car. And it matched some aspects of the physical evidence. But not everyone accepted the conclusion. In fact, many people found it difficult to believe. Families questioned how an entire vehicle could remain unnoticed during construction. Former workers questioned certain details surrounding the project timeline. Some investigators privately admitted they still had doubts. The biggest concern involved the condition and placement of the car. Experts noted that the vehicle appeared unusually positioned. Critics of the official theory argued that it looked less like a vehicle that accidentally crashed into a pit and more like one that had been deliberately lowered into place. Others pointed to the unusual overnight construction activity described by former workers. Why had portions of the concrete work reportedly been rushed? Why were certain records incomplete? Why were there discrepancies in the documentation? None of those questions received definitive answers. And because there were no surviving eyewitnesses who could explain exactly what happened, speculation continued. Attention once again focused on Paul Henders. For some observers, he remained the central figure in the mystery. His involvement with the construction project, the unusual work schedules, the inconsistencies investigators identified during interviews, all of it fueled suspicion. Unfortunately, authorities faced a major obstacle. Before any potential criminal case could move forward, Henders died. With his death, investigators lost the opportunity to question him further. If he knew anything about the burial of the vehicle, that knowledge went with him. For many people, that was the most frustrating part of the entire case. The possibility that someone might have known the truth, and that the truth might never be fully revealed. Some believed Henders acted alone. Others believed he may have been protecting someone else. A worker. A business associate. Perhaps even someone with local influence. But without evidence, those theories remained speculation. Investigators could not prove them. The families faced a painful reality. After decades of searching, they finally knew where their loved ones had been. But they still did not know exactly why they ended up there. Joseph's relatives described the experience as bittersweet. The uncertainty was over. Yet important questions remained unanswered. William's family expressed similar feelings. For years, they imagined countless possibilities. Now they had some answers. But not enough. Nikki's mother continued to believe that other people knew more than they had admitted. She publicly stated that she could not accept the idea that nobody noticed a vehicle beneath a construction site. Her frustration was understandable. After waiting nearly a quarter of a century, she wanted certainty. Instead, she received probabilities, possibilities, theories. As the investigation approached its conclusion, officials prepared a final report. The report summarized years of work, forensic findings, engineering assessments, historical records, witness interviews. Everything investigators had learned since the discovery of the Pontiac. The final classification reflected the uncertainty surrounding the case. Authorities concluded that the deaths appeared accidental but suspicious. It was a phrase that immediately attracted attention. Accidental, but suspicious. To many people, those words seemed contradictory. Yet investigators believed they accurately reflected the available evidence. There was insufficient proof to establish homicide. There was also insufficient confidence to dismiss concerns surrounding the vehicle's burial. The case occupied a gray area between tragedy and mystery. A place where facts existed alongside unanswered questions. In the months following the report, media outlets revisited the story. Documentaries were produced. Newspaper articles examined the investigation. True crime enthusiasts debated the evidence. Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Some believed the official explanation. Others remained convinced that a cover-up had occurred. The debate continues to this day. What is beyond dispute, however, is the impact the case had on those left behind. For nearly 24 years, families lived without answers. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. Parents grew older. Friends built families of their own. Yet the absence of Joseph, William, and Nikki remained. Every milestone carried a reminder of what had been lost. The discovery of the Pontiac brought a measure of peace. The teenagers were no longer missing. They could finally be brought home. Proper memorials could be held. Families could visit graves instead of wondering where their loved ones might be. That mattered. Even if the mystery itself remained incomplete. Cases like this remind us why cold case investigations are so important. Sometimes answers come quickly. Sometimes they take decades. And sometimes the truth emerges from places no one expects. A forgotten field. An abandoned building. A remote lake. Or, in this case, beneath a slab of concrete that thousands of people passed without a second thought. For investigators, the case became a lesson in persistence. For families, it became a testament to hope. And for the community, it became a reminder that some mysteries never truly disappear. Even when memories fade. Even when evidence grows old. Even when the world moves on. The truth has a way of waiting. Waiting quietly. Waiting patiently. Waiting to be discovered. Nearly 24 years after 3 teenagers left their prom and vanished into the night, the world finally learned where they had been. But whether it ever learns exactly what happened remains uncertain. Perhaps the official explanation is correct. Perhaps it is only part of the story. Perhaps someone carried the truth to their grave. We may never know. What we do know is that Joseph Mullaney, William Hamilton, and Nikki Belais left a celebration filled with laughter and dreams. They expected to return home. They never did. And for decades, their disappearance stood as one of the most haunting mysteries in local history. A mystery buried beneath concrete. A mystery hidden in plain sight. A mystery that reminds us how fragile life can be and how powerful unanswered questions become. Because sometimes the most chilling cold cases are not the ones with no answers. Sometimes they are the ones that leave us with just enough answers to keep us wondering forever. If this story stayed with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe this was a tragic accident, or do you think someone intentionally hid the truth? We'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy deep true crime investigations like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Cold Case 247, and turn on notifications so you never miss another cold case. Your support helps keep these forgotten stories alive and ensures that the people at the center of them are never forgotten. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and thank you for watching Cold Case 247.